Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. Should the weed killer glyphosate be banned for drying out crops before harvest? The Soil Association claims chemical residues could be causing us harm, but the government says using glyphosate is safe as long as strict regulations are followed.
We're asking for the government to take action and to ban the use of this chemical as a pre-harvest desiccant drying agent.
We'll have more from the Soil Association later on. First today, the sounds of the countryside can be every bit as evocative as its sights. The dawn chorus or the burbling of a stream can conjure up a mood or a special place. So this week on Farming Today, we're exploring the landscape of the UK through sound. Nature can make a lot of sounds that we don't hear as well. So today we have noises from an underground world. Dr. Jacqueline Stroud of Warwick University is a soil scientist who's been using microphones to eavesdrop on life below the surface, especially earthworms. Sarah Swadling met her at one of her field trial sites at Rothamsted Research.
The thin metal probe, it's actually like a syringe needle, and it picks up any of the vibrations that things like earthworms are making as they move through the soil, or insects like ants, which are sort of tapping the soil or vibrating it. And so it's a way of listening in to their communications or movement sounds.
Why listen to what's going on under the surface rather than looking?
As you can see, I haven't had to dig a hole, so we're leaving the environment completely undisturbed. And the other thing is that many organisms use sounds and vibrations, particularly predators, to locate things like earthworms, for example, because birds often can use acoustic cues to find them.
The one that springs to mind would be, the blackbird jumping up and down to make the worms come up.
Yes, exactly. It's the way that soil organisms most likely communicate with each other and use that to navigate their soil environment, because they obviously don't use sight like us or hearing like us. They use like tremors, tapping on the soil substrate, rubbing their body parts together, like this sort of things, alarm signals, things like that, particularly in the insect world. And so by actually tapping into how these organisms live, as opposed to always going for our senses like sight, let's dig it up, it gives us, I think, a much better opportunity to understand soil systems. Here we're at the Highfield experiment at Rothamsted, where there are treatments such as long-term grass, long-term fallow and long-term arable, and we're measuring the soil noises in these different environments. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're popping in the sensors and leaving them out overnight for long periods of time, because that's the time we have no idea what goes on in soil systems. I mean, who goes out digging holes in the middle of the night? And at night, it's really surprisingly noisy. You do get lots of sounds, and particularly like earthworm noises, we think. You come back in the morning and you see all the big worm casts. It's been quite busy. And sometimes you'll find the odd ant nests that have decided to decant themselves all over your sensors. In the grass, we're hearing noises every second. It's like almost a continuous noise coming from the soil, sort of like crackles and pops, and sometimes they're very regular and spaced.
Why do you think that might be?
I think it's because there's a lot more soil life under the grass plots. They've been established like this for 10, 20, it depends where we're standing, hundreds of years. If you just sort of look down below, you can see worm casts and evidence of various creatures here. Whereas when we're on that bare fallow just over there, you get maybe a sound event once a minute. And then if you're on the arable, it's sort of between the two. There are like patches of activity and patches where you don't really sort of hear anything. It takes me by surprise sometimes, because I see a plot that doesn't have a lot that looks like it's going for it, and you plug the sensors in and it can be alive with sort of crackles and pops and those sorts of noises, and it's just you just get that intense curiosity. So not a lot going on above ground. What is going on below the ground?
Is there understanding still to unlock then by starting to eavesdrop on this world, things that we don't really know yet?
Absolutely. I think this is like a new start for soil science almost, because it's looking at sensory ecology and understanding about how things that we're doing on above affects this world below us, which operates fundamentally different senses. It's just a new way of thinking about soil systems.
Dr. Jacqueline Stroud there, and we asked you to send in your sounds of the countryside too. So thank you to Simon Wilkinson, who sent us the sound of the dawn chorus from Finemere Wood in Buckinghamshire. And Fiona Cowney emailed us at farming.today@bbc.co.uk to share the sound which evokes the countryside for her, a bubbling stream. She said this was recorded near Foston in Leicestershire on her regular walks with her walking buddy. Thank you, Fiona. Please keep sending your sounds of the countryside. You can email them to farming.today@bbc.co.uk. Now, the use of the herbicide glyphosate has long been debated, and it's going to come under intense scrutiny in the coming months. This summer, the Health and Safety Executive will launch a public consultation on whether approval for the use of glyphosates should be renewed. The consultation will run for 2 months. In the EU, a decision was made in 2023 to renew glyphosate approval for 10 years, though with restrictions on how it can be used to dry off crops before harvesting. Here, the NFU and other farming organisations support the continued use of glyphosate-based weed killers, including as a pre-harvest desiccant in cereals and oilseed rape. They say it reduces the need for other herbicides, helps protect soil and cuts greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the need for ploughing. Well, today the Soil Association, along with a number of other environmental groups, are launching a petition calling for glyphosate to be banned as a pre-harvest desiccant. Kathy Cliff from the Soil Association told me why.
Unfortunately, the chemical glyphosate is making its way into our bread, cereal and beer because in addition to glyphosate being used as a weed killer, it's also being used to dry out crops just before harvest, and this can leave residues in these foodstuffs that we're eating every day, and glyphosate has been linked to cancer, and we don't want that.
There are very strict regulations about residues on what we eat, and the government would say that glyphosate is absolutely safe at the correct levels that it has in its regulations. The sort of image that you're putting across is that our food is dangerous.
We're asking for the government to take a precautionary approach. What we're concerned about is that those levels may be reliant on outdated science, as evidence increasingly comes to light about many of the pesticides and other products that we're using today, that we need to change our regulation, we need to update it, and we're asking for the government to take action and to ban the use of this chemical as a pre-harvest desiccant drying agent.
Well, let's talk a little bit there about the farming use of it. Regenerative farmers who use cover crops say they do need it. You know, they believe they're protecting soil health by using cover crops, but they need to use glyphosate to kill off that crop. What do you say to them?
Farmers are using glyphosate across the year for different purposes, but our campaign is focusing particularly on its use as a pre-harvest desiccant, which many regen farmers are not doing. Many of them are not engaging in this practice.
Yeah, but they're still using glyphosate to kill off their cover crops.
We're particularly concerned about the use of glyphosate as a pre-harvest desiccant because it's sprayed on food that we're about to eat, and there's the risk that residues from the chemical will end up in our foods. We feel that this is really the primary method of using glyphosate that we need to address now. The UK
sorry, can I just get this clear? So you're saying it's okay to use glyphosate to kill off cover crops, but it's not okay to spray it on crops as a desiccant pre-harvest?
We're campaigning for healthy and sustainable food and farming and for progress in those areas. We have support for our campaign from groups like the Nature Friendly Farming Network, who are supporting our campaign and are calling with us for an end to the practice of using glyphosate as a pre-harvest desiccant.
But you still say it's okay, though, to use it to kill off cover crops in a regenerative farming scenario?
The Soil Association isn't supportive of using glyphosate in a farming system generally. The reason that we're calling for a ban on this particular use of glyphosate now is that it's been banned in this way in the European Union, and the UK government is negotiating an agreement with the European Union around an agri-food trade deal, which would require alignment with EU pesticide regulations. So this is really an opportune time now to address this particular practice, this particular use of glyphosate.
So what alternatives could farmers use then if you don't want it used as a desiccant to dry out those crops before harvest?
There are solutions available. Those will need funding. They will need supporting. There'll need to be more research and innovation, independent advice. And there are many ways in which we need to move towards a more human health and nature-friendly farming system and away from one that simply relies on speed and uniformity.
Kathy Cliff at the Soil Association. Professor Andy Neal is Director of Research at the Centre for Dynamic Soils. I asked him what he thought about the Soil Association's points about the use of glyphosate as a desiccant.
So expressing concern with the use of glyphosate as a desiccant. I've been concerned about that for a while now, and particularly, getting across the nuance of how glyphosate is used in agricultural systems is really important to have a properly well-educated discussion about where we should really be using it as an effective tool in agricultural systems.
She said, though, that it's being sprayed on food that we're about to eat. There are rules and regulations, aren't there, about using glyphosate as a desiccant, and the government would say it's perfectly safe to use if you follow the rules.
I think there's a lot of concern about the potential carcinogenic effects, but I think there's also a lot of uncertainty in the way those studies have been done. And I think there's very high doses, often doses that we wouldn't be subjecting ourselves to if we did eat these foods. But I would rather not have glyphosate sprayed on my food. I think in that sense, I do agree with the thrust of this debate. My greater concern has long been that this practice, because it could get such a bad name for the use of glyphosate, will prevent glyphosate being used in agricultural systems for all the good that it can bring to regenerative practices, particularly about sustaining and supporting soil structure and soil performance. I've always been concerned that if we don't get this right, it'll be banned and lost as a very effective tool for improving the state of our soils.
It's a difficult line to tread, isn't it? Because farmers who use cover crops do need to use glyphosate to kill off that crop so that the food crop can grow better. And the cover crop has been there to protect the soil.
They don't necessarily need to spray, but the alternative of ploughing it in, we know is extremely destructive for soil systems. And we know that we lose an awful lot of organic matter when you plough. The structure of the soil is lost. It holds less water, so there's less water holding capacity during drought, and it also allows less infiltration, so we get lots of runoff during heavy rainfall. So it's not that we have to use glyphosate to kill off cover crops. It's just that avoiding using the plough has so many other benefits. That's the perspective we need to think about why glyphosate is a useful tool, because it prevents that physical disruption of soil.
The use of glyphosate is up for renewal, isn't it, in December? So the Health and Safety Executive has to look at it again.
We need to understand, society needs to understand better how and why glyphosate is used, why glyphosate can be used in the right circumstances to improve environmental state of soils, rather than having it always labelled as a negative in agricultural management.
Professor Andy Neal from the Centre for Dynamic Soils. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.